Thank you, Madam Chair. And I thank the witness for appearing. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this subcommittee. I am very much concerned about our military families. And as you know, members of the military are sometimes required to relocate. And upon relocating, they have mortgages that have to be dealt with. Sometimes they have to have short sales, they have to have refis, and these things are sometimes difficult to negotiate with servicers because of what servicers perceive as a limited amount of authority. These persons who serve us in our military, they do so without question. They go where they're told to go. Families go with them. I'd like to compliment, if I may, also the President and First Lady for the Joining Forces initiative, which helps them with education, jobs, job training. But can you explain what the CFPB is doing in concert with FDIC and some other agencies to make sure that they can get the assistance that they need when they have to transfer, they have to relocate to some other area because they are forced to do so as a result of serving our country? Well, thank you. I trust that we'll promote rules that will help them to make this transition and maintain their credit worthiness and in general, not get caught with a home that they can't do anything with because of the current market conditions. I hope that you'll do your best. Now, I have a minute and 16, 17 seconds left. Have you been asked any question that you would like to respond to and you need perhaps a moment to answer, or some statements that may have been made that you didn't get a chance to respond to? If so, you now have a minute to do so. Thank you. I yield back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Luchtmeyer for 5 minutes,
Mr. Green
please.
for 2 minutes. 5 minutes, excuse me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I thank you and the ranking member again. Let's start with SIFI. To a good many members of the public, SIFI is sci-fi. It really is. And perhaps we can find a way to explain this in a much more intelligible fashion for persons who are not privy to much of the intelligence that you two fine witnesses are sharing with us. So let's start with a very basic question. Was AIG a non-bank financial institution? Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I tend to ask questions that you can answer yes or no. And was AIG into many different kinds of products, exotic products, if you will, credit default swaps, derivatives? Was AIG into what we now refer to as exotic products, Mr. Gibson? Okay, well, I understand the Federal Reserve was not, and I'm not going there, but I am going here. Was AIG the type of institution that FSOC would be designed to have an impact on? You want to pass, Mr. Gibson? I'm still with you. Of course it would. It was over $50 billion, wasn't it?
Yes.
Go on, elaborate. Tell us why AIG would come under the auspices of FSOC. Who knew that AIG was a part of the glue that was holding the economic order together? Mr. Aura, am I pronouncing your name correctly, sir?
Yes.
AIG, after the fact, we discovered, was a part of the glue holding the economic order together, true? And that is your way of saying yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, given that we know that there are other AIGs, not in the sense that they are right now about to go out of business, But there are other big businesses that may pose systemic risk. They may become sci-fis. And because we know that they may become, or maybe they are sci-fis or sci-fis, is this not a means by which we can deal with them without making an attempt to prevent them from making bad business decisions? Here's what I'm saying. We can't stop businesses from making bad business decisions. My belief is that that happens, and that's a part of the ebb and flow of doing business. But we can deal with the consequences of bad decisions. And is that what we are attempting to do here, Mr. Gibson, to deal with the consequences of bad decisions by these mega businesses? And for edification purposes, those who would like to, go back to the stock market crash. Read about how the resistance that took place when we were trying to put FDIC in place. And FDIC has proven to be very beneficial when we are looking for an orderly means by which we can liquidate banks. True, Mr. Gibson?
Yes, the FDIC is...
Are we trying to do the same thing now with non-bank institutions?
That is the intention of the Title II Orderly Liquidation Authority, is to extend what the FDIC currently has for banks to non-banks.
And I will just simply close with this. And we can do this and not over-regulate. And I think that's what we're trying to accomplish today. Do you agree that we can do this and not over-regulate, Mr. Gibson?
That is what we are trying to do.
Mr. Ora?
I would agree.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Luckmeyer?
And now, last but certainly not least, the interloper, gentleman from Texas, former member of the committee, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I greatly appreciate your allowing me to be a part of this august body. I do want to thank all of the witnesses for your appearing today and for the intelligence that you've accorded us. I am greatly benefiting from what you've shared. I do want to focus momentarily with Dr. Levitt. Dr. Levitt, you talked about the traditional profile, which would lead me to conclude that there must be a non-traditional profile. And you mentioned at least one example. Before I go to my question, would you just go back through the example of utilizing certain persons to drive cars, please? I want to make sure I clearly understood the example that you were sharing. Is it possible that they would metamorphose into selecting persons who are of American ancestry? When we talk about these networks, are they likely to be persons who are from the country that we're in?
Fraud component.
So, Dr. Levitt, are you getting close to saying that we shouldn't worry about persons who are born in this country becoming a part of any of these criminal activities? Is there a reason for us to make sure that our vision is broad and that we don't exclude persons simply because they happen to be from a given place?
Exactly.
Mr. Schreiker, would you say a word on this, please? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Green, the time of the gentleman's expired.
Great gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, we have about 4 Texans in the House currently, and I'd like to welcome Mr. Parcell to the committee. I have met with the small bankers in Texas, a good many of them, not all of them, and small bankers from other places as well. And they all echo the same concerns. And it's been said enough for me to want to find some means by which we can ease some of the consternation. I'm not sure what the solution is, but I'd like to, if I may, ask you, do you, in your mind, sir, make a distinction between the $10 billion demarcation that we have and a community bank? Because many of the bankers that I meet with are not at the $10 billion mark. They're considerably smaller. Do you make a distinction in your mind? Are you considerably smaller than 10 billion?
We're less than 300 million.
Less than 300 billion?
less than 300 million. That is,
300 million.
I know zeros in Washington kind of get confused, sir, but
It's my hearing.
we're a lot less.
It's my hearing that some of the things don't function as well as they used to, but 300 million. And are most of the community banks that you refer to, are they less than, let's say, 500 million, or are they less than $1 billion, most of the community banks that you're referring to?
True.
And when you're smaller than $1 billion, do you tell me how are your departments organized? Do you have many departments, or do you have people who multitask? Now, believe me, I've heard the answer, but I want it for the record now.
Well, it doesn't snow very often in Big Spring, but we multitask. I sweep the
How many
porch
employees?
off. We have about 40 employees.
And would you say that most community banks with assets under $1 billion, that they do a lot of what we call multitasking, that they don't have departments set aside for compliance, adherence?
That is correct.
I'm asking this because it seems that as I talk to the bankers in Texas, and I talk to a good many, in their minds they have a distinction between a $10 billion small bank and what they call a community bank. And that's where I'm trying to find some means by which we can address some of these concerns. I don't know that we can go to a third tier. Right now we have a two-tiered system. But small community banks, they seem to have a different role. I'm picking up that they seem to serve a clientele that's much more intimately known to them. The way that they do business has a lot to do with tradition, and I'm trying to, in my mind, find a way to resolve some of these issues for the small community banks. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I want to ask one more question. What percentage of your loans do you maintain in-house, maintain on your portfolio? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman, and now the gentleman, Mr. Fincher.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, sir.
I recognize Mr. Green from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank you and the ranking member for calling us to this hearing today, and I thank the witnesses for being in attendance. Mr. Chairman, I also want to thank you because I'm one of the members who signed the letter requesting such a hearing, and I thank you for honoring the request. To the witnesses, let's start with something very basic. The bills that we have range from tweaking to the abolishing of the Fed, and I'm curious as to how many of you are of the opinion that we should totally eliminate the Fed. Is there anyone who thinks that it should be abolished? 1, 2 persons think that we should simply abolish the Fed. And if you could, just give me a quick, if you can, summary of why you think the Fed should be abolished, and then I'd like to hear from your colleagues as to why you think we should maintain it, just quickly, because obviously time is of the essence. And I'll start with you, Mr. Is it Hubner?
Herbiner, yeah.
All right, sir.
As I mentioned,
So in your opinion, the Fed will make bad decisions every time. There will be no good decisions made. It just can't have the positive impact on the economy. All right, I'm going to have to accept that as your answer and move to the next person. Mr. Klein, in your opinion, there should not be a central bank in the United States of America. How do you juxtapose that with the central banks around the world, where major countries in the world all have central banks? I think that's a fair statement. Mr. Taylor? All right. Next, please. All right, Doctor. Now, Doctor, thank you. Let me go back now in reverse order, and I'll start with you, Doctor, first. The question is, would we be at a disadvantage if we had no central bank and other major economic powers have central banks? Would it impact currency supremacy? The dollar, as you know, is a fairly well-accepted currency around the world. Would it have an impact on the dollar?
Yes, I think it would.
Okay, let me go to the next person, please. Mr. Taylor, and then I'm going to go quickly because my time is about up. Okay, would we be at a disadvantage, sir, if we had, Mr. Klein, if we had no central bank and other countries did? Sir?
If the dollar was backed by gold, I don't see how that could harm our...
So you would back the dollar with gold?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
For 3
Thank you.
minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the ranking member as well. Mr. Director, I thank you for appearing today, and I'm excited about some of the things that are happening, especially this Service Members Affairs program that you're working on. I think this is an initiative that all of us will be proud of, helping our service members, which is an opportunity for me to extend a word of gratitude to all of the members of the committee for helping with the Homes for Heroes initiative that we passed, the legislation. And my colleague, Mr. Henseling, yesterday gave an expression of appreciation, and I thank him for using a little bit of his time to give his expressions. I did not mention Mr. Grimm when I talked about this other initiative, the Home for Heroes, and it's not something that you're associated with, but Mr. Grimm was the co-sponsor, and I want to make sure that I mention him. With reference to your appearance today, you also have an office for older Americans that I think is important. I understand that Mr. Skip Humphreys is the person who will lead this agency or office, and I'm eager to hear more about this. I have some of the accomplishments. You've been there a short time, but your list of accomplishments has become very impressive over a very short period of time. This test pilot program, Know Before You Owe, I think that's something that the consumers with credit cards will be excited about. You've initiated an examination into the student loan debt. I think it's something that college kids especially are going to be excited about. You have an Ask the CFPB Q&A opportunity for members of the public so that they can increase their financial literacy. You've initiated an overdraft exploration program, and you're going to look at the harmful effects on consumers. You've created a first-of-its-kind program, a database for repeat offenders against military Rome, and this is to combat the fraud that targets our veterans and their families. I think it's an important program as well. There are many others that you have initiated, and I'm looking forward to working with you. I do want to just call to your attention something I think is important to you. A lot of the small banks are still having a good deal of consternation, and I look forward to working with you so that we might do some things to allay their concerns. I'm confident that there are ways by which we can make sure that they have a greater understanding of what we're attempting to do with this agency. So I thank you for being here today. I'm eager to hear more from you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
We're going to go ahead and start, if that's okay. Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, Mr. Director, thank you for being here. I'd like to visit with you quickly on several issues. I'd like to start, if we may, with the small banks and credit unions. As I've indicated, I've been meeting with them, and they have expressed some concerns, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to share with some of the outreach efforts that you have in place to allay some of their concerns. Now, with reference to our service members, I see that you have the Office of Service Member Affairs. I'm eager to hear what you have to say about this. I'm amazed at how important this has become to our country, the veterans as well as those on active duty. So could you share a few thoughts, and then I'll have one more question for you.
Sure.
Thank you. And finally, my district is quite diverse. We have the ballot in my district printed in 4 languages: English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese. So I'd like to know what you're doing in terms of language translation to make sure that we're communicating with all persons in the country, lawfully here, I might add. Thank you, Madam Chair. I owe you 1 minute and 15 seconds.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Green for 2 minutes. For 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank the ranking member as well. Of one thing I am totally, absolutely, and completely convinced, it is this: regardless as to how we feel, the public is of the opinion that too big to fail is the right size to regulate. It's the right size to deal with such that it does not bring down the economy. AIG is a prime example of what we did not have the authority and ability to properly deal with when it was going out of business, as it were. We cannot allow ourselves on our watch to simply say we need to get back to business as usual. And I hear a lot of that in other words. Let's get back to business as usual. We cannot afford business as usual because it brings down the economy with these institutions when they become so large that they have an impact across not only the American economy, but the economy of the world. So today, I think it is appropriate for us to examine the rules, but it's also appropriate to note that we cannot allow business as usual to become the order of the day. I yield back the balance of my time.